Hey you guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on A Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulhurst. So without further ado, let's get into the video because I have a lot to talk about. So for those of you guys who don't know, A Fire and Stars is about these two princesses, Denna and Mare. And Denna has been betrothed to Mare's brother, Thandi, for as long as you can remember, and now is at the time when they both end up going to their Denna goes off to Mineria? I believe so, yes. Yes, Mineria. Oh. Goes off to Mineria, Thandi's kingdom, to marry him. And this is when both Mare and Denna get to know each other, and through an assassination on the family member of Mare's family, the two get closer together and they end up falling for each other, if that's not obvious. So yeah, so let's just head into kind of my initial thoughts. I'm gonna try to keep this as spoiler free as possible because I haven't read this book in a couple of months, probably late July, early August, so it's been quite a bit, so I don't have a lot of things fresh off my mind from it, which is fine. I'm not complaining too much. I do wish I could give you guys more of an in-depth thing, but I also don't know if I want to continue on with spoiler-free or... oh, excuse me. Again, I'm gonna cut that out. Yeah, so I don't know if I want to do that with spoiler-free continuously, or if I want some of them have spoilers and some of them have not. So we're just gonna have to see it where I am with the books. But for right now with this one, it's currently gonna be spoiler-free. So my first thoughts on this book was I was pretty excited when I first heard about it. I heard about it on BookTube, and quite frankly, like I said, I was really excited because there's not a lot of LGBT representation in high fantasy settings. Most of the time they're kind of more so the backstory, and even then with urban fantasy settings, it's rare for them to have been, to be a main character starting off unless it's more contemporary. So to hear about a high fantasy setting where it's not just gay characters but gay princesses, because and I'm using gay as kind of an umbrella term, which I'll explain why in a second, but gay princesses, because we don't hear that a lot, it's kind of more so leaning towards the guys. In Game of Thrones we had the I forgot his name now, but there was a gay couple and they were both men, and they were a huge role, but they weren't the pivotal characters of the story. They were something that could have been and I don't want to say tossed out, but they were something that were kind of tossed to the side after a bit. So to have a YA high fantasy book talk about these two princesses falling in love, it's kind of a big game changer for me, and that's just coming from someone who is from the community and hasn't grown up and who didn't grow up with a lot of LGBT representation in here. It was very confusing for me as a child, but alright. So like I said, I was beyond excited to read this book, and it took me quite a bit to get into it, not because I didn't like it. I actually ended up really adoring this book once I got into it. It was just, I was in a time, it was the busiest part of the semester, and with high fantasy you have to get invested into these books, and that was something I couldn't do. So I thought I was doing it quite a bit of a disservice by not fully investing myself in the book and just reading it through just to read it through and see what my thoughts were. So moving on to the things I didn't like. So for the most part, the one thing that bothered me was that you could see a clear line between Denna and Mare in terms of someone who is not very knowledgeable in the community, or is perhaps a little more homophobic in a sense, could easily see, well, Mare is more of a guy, she dresses like a guy, she doesn't wear a lot of dresses, she likes roughhousing, she doesn't follow the rules, while Denna wears the atypical princesses. She's soft-spoken, she's she's soft-spoken, she doesn't roughhouse a lot, she's very to herself and likes books. So I feel you could have easily seen someone could have easily been well, if someone's writing them as one's a boy and one's more boyish and one's more girlish, then why isn't that for everything? And it's not the case in a lot of the times for the LGBTQ community, but I feel like with YA it's a little harder to break through like those stereotypes in this case. So I couldn't complain too much, but it was just like one of those moments where I was like, I wish that those two lines intersected a bit more. But what are you gonna do? Another thing that I didn't necessarily like was the ending. I felt like everything built up to this huge climactic point in the book, and then it all just kind of exploded and everything got resolved. And then I do believe in the book we had like 3 days for the entire book to conclude, and I felt like everything just kind of like resolved really quickly in terms of like the relationships between the characters and what the end goal was. And I just wasn't a fan of it. I felt like I was reading through, I was like, yes, we figured out who the killer was, and like Dana got in touch with her powers more, and it was just so like beautifully done. And then the ending was like, and we were just kind of given with, well, everything's happily ever after. The two, like I said, spoiler free, so I'm not going to try, but they just kind of had their happy ending, and that was that. And I was not a fan. I felt like we could have maybe had another like 100 pages, not 100, maybe like another like 50 pages of just us like slowing down to figure out what exactly was gonna go on. And it wasn't me. Like, it was not to say it wasn't me, but it was like the ending to me in comparison to the rest of the book didn't really happen, because the book was slow starting and then everything kind of happened, and then we were left with this cliffhanger ending. And I've been trying to do some research, but I don't see a sequel happening anytime soon. I do think it's just a standalone, which I think is a little bit of a disappointment considering where the book was going. I'm not going to go too much into it, but it felt very like we just got cut off. I wasn't a huge fan of it because I didn't get a lot of resolution from it. It was just kind of like, we got a happy ending, yay! And it's like, well, you wrote it in a sense that wasn't a happy ending, so I don't know where it's gonna go, and I feel like it could have been a really good setup for a sequel, but I've been doing a research and I just don't see it happening, or at least the author hasn't announced a sequel, which I really hope there is, like make it a duology, because if not, then it just ends. And that's not how I don't think this book, I believe this book deserves more than just an ending that ends. Like, if it's gonna get wrapped up, or if it's like, it implies that there's more that's gonna happen, but it just, since there isn't any news of like a possible sequel in the future, I really hope that it's a little bit of a disappointment to me, which is saying a lot, because for the most part I'm very content with endings. I can see exactly where the author was going, and I feel like with this one, Audrey Coulthurst seemed to have a lot more to say and didn't have enough time to say it. So hopefully we do get to see the end, to see the rest and see like where these characters go and kind of what happened. Other than that, love the book. So moving on to the things I did like. Once I finally got into the book, it was so easy to get lost in it. I didn't have an issue going through and like picking up the slow parts. I was just fully invested, and there was like so many little bits where you could just get like little peppers of like the two of them falling in love with each other, and it was just, oh my goodness. Like, yes, it was slow in the beginning, but since it is a fantasy standalone, for the most part, she did have to do a lot of world building in the beginning, so we can get to like the understanding of like who is, like, what do these names mean, who are these gods, why are they drawing some random symbols in the air, why is this not accepted, so on and so forth. And like with that, it just, like, after a while it just got so unbelievably easy to figure out who is who. Like, in the beginning, you're kind of guessing around, you're reading the title saying this is Mare, this is Dana, and by like after a couple of chapters in, or like once the story picked up a little bit, you can tell who is who. Dana has more of like the flowery kind of language, and you can just hear her voice so well. And then Mare has like, her sentences are shorter. She doesn't use as much like flowery language as Dana does. And oh my goodness, it was just so easy to get lost in, and it wasn't hard or jarring going from one character to another, which is nice, because for the most part it's always like, oh, we're switching, let me just get a second to, oh, we're switching again. And it's just, but so that was pretty nice. The character development was gorgeous. I could see where characters were going from point A to point B. it wasn't hard for me to see their struggle of like falling in love with each other, and it wasn't because they were girls, but it was because she's marrying my brother. So it wasn't that hard for me to be like to see everything that was going on. Which is nice because I feel like in a first person POV type of book, you do get a lot of descriptions, but it's not as like in depth, since we are just kind of through the character's head, and if the character doesn't have a lot to say about what's going on around them, then we're kind of left on ourselves to pick up the pieces, which I like. Sometimes I don't mind it, but I feel like with this kind of book and this kind of setting, it requires a lot of good refined detail, or else you're gonna miss out on like something that was, it's not necessary to the story itself, but necessary to tie it up, if that makes sense. Like, you're gonna need some kind of like understanding of the world, and without it, and you need the description to go with it, if that makes sense. Let's see, what else do I have? There wasn't a lot of stigma behind their being gay. Again, I'm using it as an umbrella term because in the book their sexualities were never mentioned. But it was really nice to just kind of see them, like, there wasn't a lot of stigma. They weren't worried about how they were going to end up being kicked out of their house or disowned. It was just kind of like, I'm in love with my sister's brother, with my brother's fiance. Oh my goodness. I'm in love with my brother's fiance, and that's not okay. This kind of goes against everything that I need to do. And it wasn't so, and even when we saw like another character who was, I want to say a lesbian, but again, it wasn't stated, so I can't tell you. So again, I'm just kind of using the gay umbrella term. But it wasn't like, oh my goodness, she's gay. I was like, oh, they're lovers. Okay, I can dig it, which is wonderful, because for the most part, most of the book, for any kind of like coming out, if they aren't out already, is kind of them struggling with this like identity that they don't quite understand, and it wasn't anything like that. And it's so refreshing to see them just kind of get lost in each other rather than figuring out who they are, because they already know who they are. They don't have to put a label on it, which I think is missing in a lot of fantasy, urban or high fantasy kind of settings. Okay, now here's to my favorite part. So the slow burn between Denna and Mare will destroy you. I'm saying that now to protect you. Like, it will just rip you apart, because you're sitting there and you can tell they're falling for each other in just the descriptions and the tone and like this sense of longing, and then you're like, kiss already, damn it, and then they walk away. And it's just so when they finally did get together in the book, I was like screaming in my seat. I was jumping for joy, which was saying something because I was in public when I was reading this book. Yeah. But yeah, so that was one of my favorite parts, was like, it wasn't like a bam, we're in love. It was a very slow, kind of painfully slow. It's just these two friends getting to know each other and then falling for one another, which is so, like, it is pretty much overdone in a lot of cases, but it was so refreshing to see how Audrey Coulthurst did it, because it wasn't like that agonizing, like, oh my goodness, I think I'm falling for them. It was just like the constant, like them slowly noticing like these little attributes about one another, and it was just so beautiful. And then it was just also so very heartbreaking for you to read, because a small part of you was like, they're never going to end up together, and another part was like, yes they are. And then like you can even see the conflict within these characters, that it's like, I'm in love with her, but we can't be together because she's marrying my brother, and I need to go do something that isn't that, or I'm marrying her brother and this is my duty and this is what I'm supposed to do. This is like all my life, this is what I've been told, and it's not, and it's just I'm gonna get so flustered, and I'm gonna start crying again. And on top of that, like, it wasn't just the main characters that you felt for every single one. You could understand Thandy's rage, and you could understand his relationship with Mare, and like his respect for Denna. Then you could understand Niles. It's like Nils. So I don't know how to necessarily pronounce it. I want to say Nils. That's how I've been reading it in my head. But it might be Niles. So we're just gonna say Niles. But like you can see how deeply Niles cares for Mare, and like how despite that they couldn't, like they weren't able to be together, or it didn't go the way he wanted it to go, he was still like, I will protect you, I will be your best friend, I will be here for you. And it was just so refreshing to see. And even the characters that you didn't get to see a lot of, or like the ones that ended up like dying, were just, you just got to see a lot of them in those pages. And it's saying something, considering this book is only about 389 pages. It's a lot. It's not a lot of like page real estate, considering how big the font was. It wasn't huge, but it's still like fairly big. So it's not a lot of like page real estate or book real estate for her to like create such like developed and such vibrant characters. And I just applaud her so much for that. And I want to see more of her writing. And I want to see a sequel. You can see where the theme is here. Sequel. But oh my goodness, and here I thought I wouldn't have a lot to say about this book, but it was just so magical. And I just can't get over the fact that it wasn't, there was such high expectations for this book from everyone that I've seen like excitement for, and it just exceeded that. And I was just so surprised. So hopefully I know she is coming out with some like prequel stuff, but I want to see a sequel. I want to see what Mare does with her powers, and I want to see how their relationship develops. Just want to see it all of it. So if she's watching, if Audrey Coldhurst is watching, sequel, please, I'm begging you. Pretty please. Okay. But overall, I would definitely give this book a 5 out of 5 stars, a 4.5 if I'm being really particular about the ending, which was not my favorite part in the world. But then that, definitely a 5 out of 5 stars, maybe 5.5 if I'm just gonna be honest here, because I have been babbling for probably way too long about this book. And I would definitely recommend this, especially if you're trying to add some more diverse reading into your like life and you don't know necessarily where to start, or don't want to fall into like the literature where it's just them contemplating about their sexuality for like 200 pages and then figuring out the consequences after, which is still important, but if there's just a lot of it. So if you want to get into some more high fantasy that involves the LGBTQIA plus community, I would definitely pick up this book. And just, when you're done and you're watching this review, comment below and give me your thoughts. But yeah, so that is my review on A Fire and Stars. I really would like to know what you guys thought of the book if you've read it, or if you're still contemplating on reading it, which I definitely recommend you go ahead and read it, because it's just marvelous. Like, I can't get over it, and it's been months since I read it, and I was just, whew. But yes, hit like, send me a comment about your thoughts on this video, or what do you want to see next, or if you're reading this book, or just finished, or want to read this book, and hopefully this review helped you a little bit. But like and subscribe to see more, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.